Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of PixlFeed Radio, and I'm here with my friend Joseph Ianni. Joseph, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing pretty good. Oh boy, I usually only have to say this in text, but it is with an I, not an L.
Is it O? Well, I always thought it was an L.
Well, that's the thing, like, because the capital I, some people will see that and they think the lowercase, and I have a tendency to actually write in lowercase as part of my my brand. I like writing in lowercase because I like to be like, humble. So I realize I set people up for it, but
I did not know that. We did a whole podcast and I did not know that.
Well, that's because I'm pretty sure my name was Debutify at the time of the recording. So, every now and then somebody comes in like, "Hey, Debutify, nice to meet you." I'm like,
"You're sneaky, man. Very sneaky." Anyway,
yeah, my sign is a snake.
Anyway, Joseph is a media presenter with 10 years of experience in the podcasting space, and actually currently works with Debutify, which is like one of my favorite themes for Shopify. It's a really great theme for conversions, and he's also the host of a podcast called Ecomonics. I can't say it.
It needs practice. Ecomonics.
Ecomonics. It always throws me off, man. But English is not my first language, so that's my excuse here. Which I was just on. We just recorded it, and it went live, I think, a couple of weeks ago, and we had such a great time. He actually goes in there and interviews some of the best e-commerce minds out there. So I felt very privileged for him to have me on, and we had a great conversation there. So if you guys haven't listened to it, make sure to go out there and check it out. It's really cool. And then he also leads the multimedia team behind the scenes, for in the e-commerce world. So, Joseph, I don't know where to start, man. How did you start this whole thing? Let's talk through it, because I mean, the podcast, that's a pretty big deal, especially with Debutify. So how did it all start? How did you get there?
Do you want to know how I started in podcasting or how I started with the company?
With the company and podcasting, both. So whichever you want to roll with first.
Excellent. So I've been in the podcasting space, as was said in the intro, for about 10 years, and it's taken quite a while to build up the ability to really make something of podcasting. So we'll dig into more of the backstory, but let's get through, I guess, how I came to be working with Debutify. So it's pandemic time of last year. It's like June, July, and most people are losing work, and I'm sitting here having already socially distanced for many years prior to that. Remote work. You never know when you're going to be ahead of the curve, but I was ahead of the curve, and I thought, I'm going to look for work. So just completely disassociated from what was trending for many people, just because of my particular set of skills. And what I do is I'll go into Upwork, and I will apply for one job every day. And the reason why I only apply for one job each day is because I want to know that I'm putting thought into my application, so that when I write something, I don't just hammer out 10 of them, copy and paste. So I think carefully about it, and then I write it. 3 days later, Ricky Hayes, who is the head marketer and co-founder of Debutify, responded to me. He was looking for a podcast host, and I had the credentials ready to go. Had cut my teeth hosting content, cut my teeth editing content and producing content. So it wasn't just being the talent; it was understanding how it works in the full picture. So we started this. We're coming up on about a year now. I think another 2 months, more or less. We've already recorded over 100 episodes. And we've just been rapid firing them so much that I didn't even realize when we had hit the milestone. I just looked and thought, oh wow, we actually did 100 episodes. So here's to another 600. And it's been a fantastic ride. And you said you were honored and privileged to be on the show, but really for me, it's an honor and privilege to meet every single person who comes on, because each person that I talk to expands my understanding of just how vast e-commerce is, and speaking as broadly as I can, how e-commerce is eventually just commerce. Right. You really don't see too many companies that don't have any presence online whatsoever. So whether it's just in a transactional sense, where transactions are done online, and the rest is done, on print ads and all done in person. Just the online component has impacted pretty much every business with any relevancy today. So that's part of building the picture. And so we're talking to people who are, they set up their own brands, whether they went the drop shipping route, or say they done more, what I would guess is more of like a classical traditional route where they invent a product themselves and then they start scaling it up. So, for instance, we talked to a mother who needed to develop skin cream for her and for her child. And she had a YouTube presence at the time. And then her YouTube fan said, "This is great. Can we buy this?" Next thing she knows, her product is now available in Walmart. So we're hearing a lot of different stories. We're hearing people in the marketing space, in marketing, advertising. We get to talk to like web developers. I even talked to a streamer who he does video game content, which is just the one guy, because it's not typically what we go for. But him and I, because we're both nerds, we ended up becoming good friends, and now I do his podcast every week as well. So I use the term quantum, like I usually say it as a joke, but this last year has been like quantum acceleration in terms of like my knowledge base and just how far along I've been able to evolve as a professional.
Have you started your own store yet?
Absolutely, 100%.
How long did that take? A week or two?
It took a while. Now, mind you, having done podcasting for 10 years, which is not known for being lucrative, the fact that I've been able to actually like secure employment with it, okay, right. All right, plateau reached. There's more mountain to climb for sure, but it's like, all right. I have the ability to learn, and like that's frankly that's like half the job is to learn. But yes, I do have a store. Yeah, you
get access to one of the best themes out there on top of it too. It's very it's high converting theme for sure. Who have you had on the show? I mean, I know you have some pretty popular people from YouTube as well. Who's like the biggest people that you learn from that you have had so far?
Well, some of the early episodes, because they were very close with Ricky, they were also, willing to be on the show while it got started. So some of the heaviest of hitters actually came on the show very early on. So we're talking about people like Steve Tan. We're talking about Camille Satara, the Ecom King. Ricky, of course, was also
love those guys.
Guest on the show. One episode that sticks out to me that I like recommending people was with Mark Chapon. He people know his story as a former high profile chef, and so he transitioned into the e-commerce space as well. And my conversation with him opened up my eyes to how some people have different strategies for how they approach e-commerce. I mean, I guess not everybody is like is a massive heavy hitter, but even so, they still provide a great deal of knowledge and insight, especially within their space. So some of it's relative too, right? So for instance, one guy, Steve Pope from my Amazon guy, very, very prominent figure in the Amazon conversation. So he helped me understand a lot of what's going on in the Amazon space. So some of it is relative, but so those are some of the biggest names that came to mind, but there's more. Like I'm now like going through my Rolodex, right? Because I've probably met like 75, 80 people so far.
Yeah, no, I love those guys. I mean, I don't know them personally, but obviously we're in the same, groups and, circles and all that stuff. And I mean, they're amazing.
There's just one guy I just wanted to point out, by the name of Greg Halpern. His people had reached out. They wanted to do the show. And once I had I always do some digging first. I always want to learn what I can about my guests beforehand. And what I learned about him was just like one of the most incredible stories of a life well lived. And one thing he talks about often is some of what he's learned having numerous near-death experiences. And I remember I was actually like physically shaking before he had come on. I was so excited to meet him.
That's really cool, man. That's really cool. So when you come on with a company like Debutify too, and they say, "Hey, we want you to do the podcast and all that," and you do others, how do you approach that project? Because you're starting from zero. So I know when I started my podcast, this one, then I have a personal one that I keep secret. Well, not so secret if you really want to find it, but it doesn't have my name attached to it for professional reasons. Obviously, it's just my personal, just whatever's in my head type of deal. And I started after I did this one because I started to get the hang of how to get it out there and get people to listen to it when you're a nobody. Because let's face it, I'm a nobody. And I learned from YouTube as well, because I don't know that much about SEO. I learned SEO as I started the YouTube channel. That's when it all started clicking. I mean, I know how it works, the basics of it, but I'm not an expert in SEO. I'm still not an expert in SEO. I just know how it works now. And I can grab something, and if the content's good, I can, rank it a little bit. So how do you approach a project like that? Let's say somebody that's listening right now and they want to create content and they want to start their podcast from zero. What's your approach? How did you approach, growing the podcast for Debutify from zero?
Sure. One of the first things that we did just to get the ball rolling was to do a content where I'm just presenting things by myself. And that gave me an opportunity to try to do a great deal of research and then translate that research into an episode. So starting off just talking, even without guests, is a great way to start to get a feel for it. But the solo content is really only for like the early chapter. We did have a lot of connections, so I would say whatever connections, whatever resources you have will help you a lot in starting to plan things as far down the line as you can. So some of the first guests, Ricky said, "Hey, you guys can come to the show." And they said, "Great." And you don't have to worry, I think, about trying to nail the format right away. What I found is that over time, the format will start to communicate with you as you do episodes. So you'll start to understand what are the questions that typically work in the beginning, what questions usually work in the middle, what usually works in the end. I will pick up on through lines or threads that connect different talking points guests have. So for instance, anytime we talk to somebody who's in affiliate marketing, I remember the questions or talking points specific to affiliate marketing and carry those over. So here's a specific example. And I remember this one very distinctively. So Tyler Jeffcoat, who's in the accounting space, he was the first person that I had spoken to who had talked of when you run an agency and you have multiple clients, you're learning things from each individual client that can then be aggregated, and then you can use that data to help out everybody else out. So collectively, everybody benefits from it.
Yep.
And once I realized that became a question. So anytime somebody who runs an agency comes on, which I believe includes you, although our conversation ended up being largely about Facebook versus Apple. So I'll touch on that in a second. Anytime an agency comes on, now I know what's one of the main agency questions that I can ask. So by, like the 100th episode, you'll know your format because it's actually been communicating with you all this time, rather than going in with a preconceived notion of what the show is going to be and expecting things to adhere to that when there's so much organic energy that crops up on an episode to episode basis.
Yeah, because you can grab, it's like, they say riches are in the niches, just like e-commerce. So if you pick a niche, a specific niche, which in your case for the podcast is e-commerce, the same questions are going to, the same questions can come up, or you can use the same question to get a different point of view of how they do it. Because, like when you're talking about, like, I don't know, the Tam brothers or something, they're very successful, extremely successful. They have factories. They're on a whole different level, man, in China. It's great that you get to ask the same question is going to be, you ask it to three people like that, and then you're going to get three different answers, but then I'm sure that you see the same pattern, right?
Right. So one of the ways to avoid that is to always add a degree of personalization into the question. So let's say, for instance, I didn't even know what drop shipping is. And I ask somebody, so what is drop shipping? Well, they'll give me the definition. And if I'm lucky, they'll give their take on it just or organically. But instead, what if I say, so what is your take on drop shipping? Then they're going to answer it organically. And if I'm lucky, they'll add a little bit of the definition into it so that that part of their definition comes into a bigger focus. So the more you personalize the question, the more you'll get what you're looking for from each individual, even if the subject is the same.
That is amazing. I never thought about doing it that way. But see, that's why you're a professional host and I'm not. I just go with the flow, as you can tell here.
Well, let me touch on that for a second, because At first going with the flow was not easy because I'm learning. It's not being the host that I lacked in experience, but I did lack in e-commerce experience.
Right.
So I was more heavily relying on the content that I had prepared beforehand, questions prepared beforehand. But over time, I learn what I learn, and concepts start to sink in. I'll be introduced to something, and then it'll sink in like maybe like a week later, 2 weeks later. So over time, I start to be able to go with the flow more, which it can happen in our episode, and I do value that a lot because I think that is more the kind of content that people are after. They really want to get a snippet of something that happens just magically in that moment.
Keeping it real and not canned. That's what I like about. That's why I do mine the way I do it. It's just like, listen, it's just me having a conversation with somebody that I like. Just as if we were sitting at the bar. I mean, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
How did you get that experience? Because I drank a lot in my 20s and 30s. So the only difference is that I'm completely sober right now. But I'm a huge extrovert, so it comes a lot easier to me than other people. But I still obviously you got to prepare at least a little bit, even if you know the person, just to know what topics to bring on and what questions to ask, because there's always stuff that you want to make sure you don't forget either. So
yeah, and I'm opposite of that. I'm an introvert. Which is interesting because I tend to make a lot of public facing. Well, it doesn't tell me for being good at it. How does an introvert do it? How does an introvert to handle it? And so the way I do it is no less than 17 questions. Because what I found is if somebody will answer a question and then inadvertently answer like another 6, and I'm like, I want to always make sure that I have plenty of ammunition ready just in case that the answer ends up covering more than I was expecting them to cover.
Right. So you like to be, you want to over prepare just in case. Because it's happened to me too, where like some of them are just, you have this person and you never met them before, and then on paper they look fantastic. They answer the right questions, and then you watch, a clip or listen to a clip or something. Oh, great. They'll be great on. And they come on, and I'm sure if you watch plenty of my episodes on here or listen to plenty of them, you can tell if I'm into it or not. It's not that hard for you to tell if I'm into it or not, because I'm like, okay, so, and then it's like, people will give you short answers. It's like, dude, you're not helping me here. What happened to the person that I listened to on the other podcast? That's just part of it. And I guess it happens to everybody. So that's why you got to over prepare to have things ready.
Yeah. Well, even as a guest, I still get, I get about as nervous being a guest as I do being a host. So I mean, for when I'm representing a company here, full disclosure, full transparency. So I'm mindful of making sure that I not only meet the brand's expectations but elevate them. So even as a guest, I want to make sure that I'm bringing it. And I think there's when it comes to professionalism, there's professionalism for being a guest and professionalism for being a host. I also believe that there's professionalism in being a customer as well as professionalism in being a merchant. You can be like a good customer, someone who's diplomatic, somebody who's mindful of the store employee's time. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that doesn't get imparted as much because the customers and the guests don't necessarily need to, but it's better for everybody if they do.
Right. No, you're right on that one. So, all right. So now that we covered that, let's go back to like launching the podcast. So you got all these great guests. So you got a leg up basically because you got this big names, like the 10 brothers and stuff in the industry. So you guys do your first episode. What's the process to get it to start ranking? Obviously, just walk me through it. I really want to hear the details of how you guys did this on a professional level, because let me tell you, I don't do it on a professional level. I'll just do it. You know what I mean? Because I enjoy it. And I'm trying to learn from everybody that I talk to. So what was the first step after? All right, let's say you got the Tan, one of the Tan brothers, right? Stephen Tan. All right, we got the podcast, we got to record it, we upload it. Now what? How do you do your research for keywords? How does that process go?
Sure. So there, and again, a lot of this does come back to the fact that we do have a company and we have different experts on the subject. Mm-hmm. So if somebody is just like a one-person operation, I would recommend figuring out what you have an affinity for. And by that, I mean, you might be really good on the social media side, whereas SEO might not be a strong suit. So you want to have proficiencies and you want to have affinities. Proficiency just means not being incompetent, being competent in all areas. Whereas affinity means I actually am like naturally inclined to do this. Like for me, for instance, I do have a natural affinity for, despite being an introvert, for just appearing on other people's content and word of mouth, and making really getting my guests, almost treating them like customers in a way, making them be happy customers and wanting them to spread the good word of the podcast. So that's kind of like my contribution. Right. So when it comes to SEO, I mean, backlinking is important. That's why we get the guests to provide their bios, because we expect that the guests do know what bio they want to, or what effect they want their bio to have. So when they provide that, it helps to dictate the content in a way that it might rank a little bit differently. Whereas if we were writing all of the bios ourselves, we might do really well on some guests, but it might not connect very well with other guests. So that's why using the guest bio has been a proven strategy. And we're not the only ones that do that too. Then social media. I mean, the more you can, I guess, dissect your content and get it out onto the stream more often, that seems to work out. So if we were to, let's just say we don't do this, but this is one thing that we could do even is, we took like snippet after snippet after snippet of our content and kept disseminating it onto social media to continuously get people's attention. I think the more energy it shows that we're putting into it, the more people will respond to that energy. As far as like researching keywords in specific, honestly, I kind of want to have to get back to you on that one, because it's SEO for me is not one of my strong suits. So
you have someone in the team who does it, obviously.
Yeah, we do, but with the like I said, with the proficiency that I have, if some of this has to do with some of that research that I had done prior to having the guest on, going onto their website, looking at their presence and looking at what keywords and what terminology they tend to integrate into their content. So if they like using the word conversion a lot, then that word we want to use that word when we're tagging it as well. And I don't see any downside in tagging as much as you like. So go through the content again, maybe look at the transcript if you want. There are transcribing services for you, and really take your chances on some words, because I don't think as far as I know, it doesn't, it's not a detriment to have more than less. You just want to make sure you're getting the right ones. I always tell
people, I'm like, fill it all up, man. Yeah. As many as you can. It's not going to hurt you. It's just like, I see people like, for example, on YouTube, it's like, you can have, I don't know how many characters, and they'll do like a 1-line description. I'm like, dude, that is your canvas to make your video rank. Now, I'm not saying, stuff it with keywords and stuff like that, because YouTube doesn't like that. Or this is for the podcast side of any podcast platform. They're all the same when it comes to like ranking. It's like, you want to make it sound natural, but at the same time, what the content is, because like Google and Bing and all these platforms, they're a lot more advanced now. It's all about like the actual content itself. It's going to listen to the podcast, so it knows what the podcast is about. It's transcribed, and then it matches up to the description, and it matches up to your tags. So I always tell people, I mean, from the people that I learned before I launched everything, that's what was engraved to me from day one. It's like, dude, just make sure you cover all the content naturally, because as the algorithms keep evolving, it's all about, what's natural, organic content. If you try to just do a bunch of keywords, it's not going to work. Now, don't get me wrong, I kind of like do a little bit here and there, but it's a fine line. You got to make it sound natural. And then if you know what you're doing, if you're doing it right, if you make it sound natural, it'll start ranking on its own. But obviously you need, people listening and views and all that good stuff to start getting some traction, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, one thing that I'm really happy about is, although our listener base is growing, I'd say we average about like 70, 80 listeners per episode. Two major takeaways so far. One of them is that we saw that our audience is engaged from start to finish. They consistently listen to the entire episode. And then the second one is that they're actually we're working our way towards more of like a B2B side. And one of our listeners was a copywriter, like a 6-figure, 7-figure copywriter, and he really liked the content and he wanted to be on the show. And I didn't even realize that until we started recording. I'm like, oh, you asked to be on? Holy cow! So I think I think you have networking, which is about expanding your network, but I think you also have nurturing, and I think nurturing is the side that doesn't get as much attention, which is, look at each episode and really treat each one as an individual and precious asset, and see, what can I do? Do I have to go back and redo my thumbnails? Do we need to change up the titles? Do we want to fix up the descriptions, add the tags? I think, and this isn't just in podcasting, I think this is an issue with content distribution in general, is that things tend to be highly impermanent. And there's a lot of the sense of, you'll make video content, you make audio content, and it's like it's only relevant for the first 2 weeks and then it just disappears. I try to resolve that in the content itself by making things a lot about the personality and hearing stories and I try my best not to be like, so what's the big thing that you got to do like this week that's not going to be relevant next week? Like I try to avoid that too. So it comes back into just the organic and the sincerity of the content.
That's why, I've had people who are, top 50 CEOs and then I've had people who are just starting out, a content agency. It's like, I don't care as long as I get to hear your story. And, if I like you, yeah, sure. Why not, man? You can I always learn something from everyone on here, whether it's one little golden nugget or a bunch of golden nuggets or just mind-blowing information. And that's why I enjoy the most about it. I get to talk to all these people and I get to learn from everybody, even if they're starting out and they're like complete expert on their field or whatever. So I'm sure doing the podcast, I want to pick your brain about this.
Sure.
So before the podcast, you didn't know anything about ecom, right?
I knew bits and pieces. But
you never had a store or anything like that, did you?
No, I wasn't running a store or anything like that. I was trying to help my girlfriend sell some stuff on Redbubble.
Okay.
So like little tiny bits and pieces here or there. But what I find interesting about the question too is what is defined as e-commerce, which is for most people is like running a store online. Yeah. But Uber is transacted online. In what way does that count as e-commerce? So
I can see the argument, but yeah, I get it. I get where you're coming from, but it's just an interesting observation about the terminology, but nonetheless, I never thought about it. So that's a good point to bring up. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because it's not like selling a product online doesn't eventuate into
the product.
Physical. Right? The product does arrive, and it's dropped off by somebody who's maybe they're an Uber driver anyway. So
that's true, man. I like that take. I never thought about it that way. That's really cool. See, I just got something to get me going.
Yeah.
So let me ask you something. All right. So let's say you weren't into it like in the world like you are now, meeting all these great people. So what was take me through the experience, because I remember when I found, the whole e-com world and I was just mind blown by the whole thing. But I grew up working in retail and then I had my first brick and mortar. And then I was like, I told you the story on your podcast. It was like, I always wanted to do something online, but I couldn't find my way around it. And I was distracted by a million things and I never really jumped in. But once I did, I was like mind blown by this whole world. So how was it for you when you started learning about it?
So if you want to see me like kind of understanding it, but still being pretty ignorant, there was an episode I did early on where I talked about my shopping experience with 10 different e-commerce brands. One was Uber, but then there was also some other even some drop shipping brands. And I was shocked at how really easy it is for us to start and how prevalent drop shipping was, because every time I would see an ad, I would go onto a website and I think, this is a start of somebody's mission. This is a brand that really believes in what they're doing. And the reality is, and actually there's a lot of brands who are not like that whatsoever. They just drop ship the product and sell and move on. And I seemed to have entered at a time where a lot of those were no longer working anyways, because the restrictions, I guess, became more
Yeah, you weren't there for the Wild Wild West.
Yeah,
That's when I
I missed out on the gold rush, and I'm okay with that actually.
Yeah.
So I would say the single most shocking like revelation was really how products that like a single product store or drop shipping store or brand store are selling are not their product. That they are, even if they're marketing it and branding it as their product. So for instance, I don't have them on me at the moment, but I have, these gloves that I wear to prevent the arthritis that I'm eventually going to get. And they were marketed to me for about $20, counting shipping. And so I ordered them, and I used those ones for a year. And then I learned that those gloves, those exact same gloves, are available on AliExpress for about $3. Yeah. So I ordered $20 worth. Factoring shipping. I got 2 for me, 1 for my girlfriend, and it's like, okay, so any reasonable person looks at it and thinks, did I just get ripped off? And that was a really hard argument that I had in my head, because I want to know that what I'm doing or what I'm selling comes from a place of sincerity. So the case that I made for myself is, okay, yeah, the gloves don't actually cost $20, but what does cost $20 is the marketing, is having a brand, is having a website, writing content, providing additional value to the consumer, having customer service, having to work with a third-party logistics, having to hire VAs, expand, even do some other product testing. So while the gloves weren't $20, that company, in my view, is completely justified in charging that money, because there are so many things that money needs to go towards, and it's going to take quite a while before their business gets to a point where they're going to want to start taking some of that money out, if assuming that they're in it for the long haul, like any business should be. So the product that I'm working on right now, it's not $20, but I'm going to sell it for $20 because I'm also going to spend a lot of time writing content. And I want to share that because I believe in the mission of my brand. So it was a peak and valley. It's about like, okay, now that I've seen past the veil, how do I get back to a place where I feel good about doing this? And it wasn't that hard to do. Once I got into the whole process, and it does, and really business like that has been like that all over the place. Like Coca-Cola a can of Coca-Cola is not $1; it's like 15 cents. So right. It's not relegated specifically to e-commerce. This is just the way of things.
Yeah, I mean, when I started, I did a lot of drop shipping, and but I was doing 75% print on demand because I felt more comfortable offering something original. Sure. And then the other, side that I did, it was just products that I found, but, it wasn't that easy to find on AliExpress back then. But, even though that, we went through all of that, I personally still felt like guilty about it, that they could just Google it and find it. And I did have people that complained, a couple times, like, I found it here for cheaper. And believe it or not, I gave him the same explanation. I was like, yeah, that's the manufacturer. You can be more than welcome to order from them. I'll be more than happy to give you a refund. But, we're a company. We have people to pay. We have a website. You never would have found out about it unless you saw the ad. Customer service, something's wrong with it. You're going to get it in 5 days instead of 60 days or 30 or whatever it was back then. So, I mean, it's up to you. And 99.9% of people said, I get it. All right, cool. We're good. And never complain again. So, I mean, that's just manufacturing costs, but people have access to this whole world now that they can find, the direct pricing for it. And it's just like, some people are just going to do that and they're never going to get it. And those people, you don't want them as a customer anyway. But I always say, the goal should always be to go from drop shipping to at least private labeling that product if it's working out and making it your own. Mm-hmm. So you don't have those issues. And now you have a brand. It's all about building a brand. I'm sure you've heard this a million times on the podcast that you host, because you're just running a risk at that point. You can only do it for so long before people complain online. And then, all it takes is one post on Reddit and then you're done, it'll make it to the front page of Google. Right.
Mm-hmm. And if I believe in the product, I would also want to have my own say in how it's manufactured. To go from something that I'm just testing to
you can always improve it.
Actually had my own had my own take on what I think
what I used to do, I will look at the, if I sold a product and then I will, people will give me like feedback or bad reviews or complaints. I will look at the complaints and just reach out to the manufacturers like, hey, how can we fix this? Can we do this? Can we do that? And 99% of the time they will do it. And the next thing you just fix the problem, put your name on it, and boom, now you can charge double for it, So, so obviously the store and all that, so as the journey kept going on your end, what else did you started to just, what else was mind boggling to you the more you kept, meeting all these people, like their stories or, anything like that?
Sure. So I'll give you a subject first, which was affiliate marketing. That was probably one of the most exciting concepts that was introduced. Just the idea of being able to promote something and not even have to worry about drop shipping it, which is already a low cost, low barrier for entry model. The idea that I can actually just talk about something I'm enthusiastic about and provide links and promote on behalf of other people, that was exciting for sure. So that's something that I would want to integrate into my strategy. And I would recommend anybody do the same because it's not going to cost you anything. You just got to talk about something you like.
I do.
And even a problem, even a problem that I was having today was like, okay, well, let's say I'm really enthusiastic about a particular product, but that product doesn't have an affiliate link. Well, what I could do is I just figure out who's selling it and send an affiliate link to another company, to another store, rather than make it a product specific affiliate link. So even that was just something that blew my mind even today. But as far as like people, oh man, it's like, I don't know if you ever watch The Simpsons, but all those.
It's been a while, but yeah, I've seen my show.
Yeah, like all of those things are all like trying to get to the door at the same time. Like I'm just like, who do I want to pick first? One fella, he, Ethan Dobbins, as of this recording, his episode isn't out yet, but he had already sold like his first business. And so that was kind of mind boggling because I had spent so much time thinking about, the long-term investment strategy of growing a business and making it, be run on its own. And I just completely forgot about the exit, which is, well, actually, you're at some point you might want to sell this thing so that you can take the capital and move on to the next thing. So there was that. There was another one, Andrew and Mark Pierce of Cloud Peak Law. They are experts in LLC, which is an important component to legitimizing your business.
Right.
And what was mind-blowing about my conversation with them is how accessible it actually is to set up an LLC. I was thinking this is going to be something that's going to cost me like $30,000, and no, it's not even a fraction of that. So that eased a lot of the concern that I had, for sure.
Isn't that crazy that people, I mean, it just takes some digging, man, but the people don't do it. And then when I hear them like, yeah, I went to LegalZoom and paid like, I don't know how much to get my LLC, I'm like, you could have just gone to your state government site and paid $100. It would have been 2 minutes done. But, but that's how we live and learn. There's a lot of things I didn't know when I was starting out, that's why I'm trying to vicariously live through you, like going through like because I remember like meeting all these people and like being completely mind blown, especially when I saw the numbers and especially, with Facebook back then and how the numbers grew and all that. And it's to this day, I'm very like passionate about it, as you can tell. Like I love it. I love it. And when I have people on, I learn something new, and it's really cool. So how many episodes are we in the podcast right now?
Oh, if you just give me like a split second, I will. Okay, I actually, it's going to take too long to open up iTunes. We are running at about like 85, 86 episodes. We have about 100 or so recorded.
So you have 100 or so recorded already. How long has it been since you launched the podcast? Because it hasn't been that long either, right?
No, less than a year. We basically started like beginning of August with our solo content. So closing in, we're down to our last quarter before it's going to be a full year.
So now I know that you're also you're a writer as well, a creative writer. So how did you make the transition? Did you use the skills that you know from creative writing to use copywriting for your store and also for the podcast to create the episodes? Is that a skill that you transferred over?
By luck, yes, it was able to transfer over. I would say some of it with with the questions that I prep beforehand. My producer does a fair share of the legwork just to kind of like collect the information and start me off with some questions. Writing isn't just like the word by word structure. It's also about big picture. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that any creative writer has to do when they want to convey a story is to get a sense of what's the arc in full scope. What's the beginning of this, what's the middle of this, what's the end of this. And for me, the arc is starting as a learner, as a greenhorn, and over time be more informed, be able to hold more complicated conversations, and start my own store and prove that all of what I've learned so far is actionable. Because if I can do it, anybody can do it. Granted, I do have a few extra resources at my disposal, but I'm also sharing as much as I can with everybody else. So I'm doing my best to get other people going. So part of writing it is also having a vision for the show in broad scope. So my vision is another 2 years, another 3 years down the line is I've made it. And now, my stores are doing well. I've integrated everything that I've learned, and I'm gotten to the point where I'm able to revisit conversations that I've had with some of the earlier guests, and having been more elevated, be able to have like a different conversation. So that's part of writing. It's not just word construction. Some of it is seeing how, or what are the plots, what are the subplots. So like I was saying, whenever I have an agency, for instance, that's kind of a subplot. Like at any time that there's an agency on, I know what questions I ask agencies. When I have drop shipping people on, I know what questions I'm asking them. I think the most tangible component has been writing intros, so that I have like little 25 to 30 second introductions for each episode, and just what are the main takeaways that I've had, so people understand what the conversation is going to be about. So I get to write that. Early on, some of the solo content, got to be able to write that as well. Outside of the podcast, running the multimedia department, there's a lot of writing involved there as well. So I'm actually quite grateful with how much I get to write for the company as a whole. It's a lot more than I was expecting.
That's pretty awesome, man. That's great to hear. So we're running out of time here. We have a few minutes left. So what's in the future for the podcast? What's in the future for you? What's in the future for the brand? Walk me through what do you think is going to happen in the next 5 years for each?
Awesome. Well, for Debutify, we're hard at work with expanding our service. So we're going to be looking into offering other products as well as a theme. Obviously, it'll all be integrated. So for the value that we offer now, we're looking to 10x that value by being able to provide other solutions as well. So that's what we can look forward to regarding Debutify. Regarding the podcast, there's lots of conversations going on behind the scenes and how we can evolve it. And so what I aim to do is see what I can do about more formats, maybe do more like roundtable discussions. We're having like not just like one-on-ones all the time, but to also have several people who all have an affinity for a certain aspect of it to join together and see what knowledge we can unearth. For me, the pressure is on to deliver and to run a successful store. Right. You are looking at the Guinness World Record holder for the person with the least excuse possible. No excuse whatsoever. I got the resources, I got the knowledge, I've got the drive, I've got the income. So if I can't do it, I have failed significantly. So I'm taking that pressure and I'm going to do great things with it.
But if you fail, all right, you learn something from it and you apply it to whatever the new store is or the new brand or whatever. Hey, listen, it happened to me, and almost 90% of the people that I know who started when I started, they all fell at something at first. So, I mean, if it happens, I hope it doesn't, but Also, you have a huge advantage too. We didn't have
Yeah,
any, talk to all access to all these people and all that. So anyway, Joseph, thank you so much for coming on, man. I really enjoy it. I really enjoyed being on the podcast. Go check it out there. Obviously all the links will be in the description, but Joseph, where can everybody find you?
Our podcast is Ecomonics. So you take, e-commerce and you get economics and you put it together. It is ECOMONICS. You type that into Google and Google says, "Are you sure you meant economics?" And you can say, "No, Google, not this time." Telling Google no is one of the most satisfying things you can do. So so do that. Debutify. If you're not running a store yet, but you're thinking about it, head on to debutify.com and it will.
It's an amazing thing.
It will present all of the functionality that you need to get a store going. So, you
don't need a million apps. It's all built in. It's amazing. It really is. Mm-hmm. All right, Joseph, thank you so much, man. Till next time, I really appreciate it. And till next time, everybody, make sure to like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And I will see you guys on the next episode. Thanks.